Hello everyone, welcome to another Music Talk Tuesday, and today I thought it would be interesting to bring up a topic that I think is fairly relevant, at least when it comes to where music sort of stands nowadays. And I sort of wanted to ask this in a form of a question: is rock, in other words, rock the genre of music, becoming less popular? What I find so fascinating about rock and roll, in particular rock and roll music, is how influential it's been to music's development. I mean, when you look at all of the genres, um, rock has had probably the most influence within the 20th century. It had its dominance and its evolvement, and it really was the sort of go-to music of the later half of the 20th century. When you right from the 50s all the way up until the early 2000s, even rock has played a huge role. Now, as far as how it's changed, it's obviously changed significantly over the years. Not all rock music is the same, and you've got tons of subgenres from grunge to punk um, to country rock. You've got all of these different blends of instruments and sounds and whatnot and styles, and obviously the rock of the 60s is definitely not the same as the rock of the 80s or the 90s. But it is a very interesting genre because there is not only a lot of subdivisions of or subgenres of rock, but it was really um, it was just so influential as far as music and as far as shaping music. But it seems like a lot of the influence that rock had within the later half of the 20th century is not really transferring over into the 21st century. Now, rock did maintain its popularity, I think, within the earlier 2000s. I mean, you still had, bands like Green Day were, really big, and you had Blink-182. You had a ton of bands that were sort of, that sort of crossed over into that time period of the 90s into the thousands or 2000s. But now we're seeing a completely different shift as far as music is concerned. And I think there's a lot of factors that are influencing why rock is not as popular, as influential, as relevant to music as it was within the 20th century. Now, there are certain theories that you could go about explaining why this is. I think one in particular is technology. In particular, I think you could consider autotune a big factor. I think within the 20th century, and with the amount of technology they had, a lot of musical talent was based on merit. It was based on your ability to play an instrument. It was based on your capabilities as an artist to transform and to basically to produce music, to be productive. Whereas now with technology, as we enter the 21st century, I think there was this shift because autotune has not only influenced voice but also instruments too. And I think a lot of people that were within the 20th century, even the bands that were within the 90s, don't want to, make their music perfect, so to speak. They don't want to, conform to using the latest technology to change their music. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that since rock is so old and it has had that heyday, so to speak, it's obviously going to have that mindset, that 20th century mindset instead of the 21st century mindset, where it's just like, hey, it's, technology makes things easier. Why not use technology? And it's like, well, it's not really it's not really our music if we let technology do all the work. So I think that's really what's influenced a lot of bands to not, um, not really be in the spotlight, because, you know, uh, it's just become a lot easier for artists to become successful, even if they're not really that good. And I think that's really what sparked a lot of those that probably were into the 20th century rock and roll to not really carry it on within the 21st century, because within the 21st century, there's not a whole lot of emphasis on, basing your musical talent off of merit as so much as, basing it off of, other things like looks and status and things like that. So it's a completely different culture. And the 20th century was, again, based more on talent and things like that. But now it's not so much. So that's, I think, one of the reasons why rock is not that popular anymore. It didn't maintain its relevancy because, you know, the 21st century sort of came and said, hey, let's use technology. And all of the older musicians and people that were within the 20th century who've known rock and roll for years and years go, nope, not doing that. I think it's, if you look up the Foo Fighters, the drummer that was for Nirvana, I think his name's Dave, his first name at least. I think he even said that, at one point that, we're not going to use artificial means to make music. I mean, it's just not nothing human to it. It just doesn't have that touch of quality. It's just artificial. So that's why they just decided to not go that route. And in doing so, I mean, they still have a certain extensive amount of popularity, but as much popularity as, someone who is within the genre of pop, yeah, when you compare the numbers, unfortunately, it's a lot lower. Now, I think music in the 20th century, that was primarily rock and roll influenced, was, even though it was about dancing and it was about, having fun, so to speak, it was usually about the sound and the emotions that the music gives you, and sort of about the experience of the music. And people could enjoy, a slower song, or, they could appreciate, just sitting and listening. Um, you know, the even though rock is known to be very fast, there is still soft rock and things like that. I mean, there is some influence there, but at the same time, the attention span, as far as everything else is concerned, was there within the 20th century. You could sit down and you could just enjoy a song for the sake of enjoying a song. You didn't have to be constantly up and down, or you didn't constantly need you didn't need the constant noise. You just needed to listen and to absorb the emotions of the music, which was primarily what music was about, I think, largely in part in the 20th century. But now, I think there has been a huge shift, in particular to this very, noisy sounding music, whereas before, um, within the 20th century, music was, regardless of how fast or slow, it was designed on providing some creativity and creating a emotional response. Excuse the phone. Can somebody just answer the phone? Really? That's so hard. But basically, so it was, so the emotions have shifted now, and within the 21st century, it's just more about making noise. It's about dancing, having a good time, just, but not so much about the creativity or the intellect behind the music. If you look at lyrics that are in an average song of today, they're completely different and have a lot of different meanings than songs that were within the 20th century. I think there's a lot more creativity that was behind the rock and roll genre back in the day. But now, as we enter to this 21st century, it's a lot more about, just letting go and not thinking about anything, not having any kind of, meaning, or not even in creating a song with no meaning with creativity. It's just it's just all based around noise and being kind of just more loud and more obnoxious. And I'm not saying that all 21st century music is bad or is completely converted, but I think we're seeing the shift. We're seeing this conversion to, this very techno-y, or I guess you could say just very dance and dancing, robotic, and just very artificial sounding, you know, music, as what you would call it. So, and I think largely it's based on shifting more to pop, shifting more to, again, kind of a more genericness. Instead of trying to be authentic and make something new or provide something new to the table, it's more so now in the 21st century, it's more about blending in with one another. Whereas within rock, when rock was the primary genre within the 20th century, it was all about standing out. It was always about being different, being your own unique band. And now everybody's just kind of trying to kind of copy one another, Justin Bieber's not really a whole lot different from One Direction, despite the numbers of boys within the band. There's, Miley Cyrus is not all that different from, a lot of the other female artists out there, like Nicki Minaj, There's not really a whole lot of distinction. More so is everybody's just kind of trying to be, they're just kind of trying to be each other in a way, trying to be provocative, trying to push the envelope. But pushing the envelope, I don't think necessarily qualifies as art when you're not really pushing the envelope as far as art. You're pushing the envelope as far as wanting attention. So yes, I think that's something that deterred rock from becoming so popular within the 21st century. Because it's not just about show. It's not about putting on a glamour show. It's not like Katy Perry where she has all these different outfits and she, dances around and, there's dancing sharks in the background and, she has all these goofy outfits and, again, it's not like Lady Gaga. It's not about attention. It's about the detail of the music and of the instruments working together. It's not really about putting so much on a show. I mean, yeah, you could argue, Kiss put on a show. Other bands had some unique kind of like identity of persona. But at the end of the day, the majority of rock and roll was primarily about just, your musical ability, your capacity to create something unique as far as music is concerned, or create something inspiring. Whereas now it's all about entertainment in the 21st century. It's about a show, a performance, and this is why pop is primarily a little bit more popular now, because it's about the grandeur, the spectacle, and not so much the basics. Whereas the 21st century, there was a lot of basics, which is understandable because back then it was probably a lot more expensive and a lot more time consuming to create a music video, or to have a performance, and travel around and everywhere. But now it's, with technology and all that, it's a lot more convenient to reach out to people and to entertain, and so you don't really need to put effort into the details and all that stuff. I'm not saying that other genres did not do what rock and roll did back in its heyday, but what I'm saying is that the popularity shift is sort of, it's different. It's not as rock and roll was primarily the popular music of the 20th century, and the 21st century it is more about pop. It's more about it's less about bands, I would say, also as well. It's a lot more about the individual. Kanye, obviously, big name. Miley Cyrus, you see, it's more individualistic. The only big person right now, or big group band, is really boy bands, and even then, One Direction's not even really becoming a band anymore since one guy's sort of ditched and split. So it's largely becoming a little bit more individualistic as far as what people are looking for when it comes to music. There's a lot more emphasis on just one person being the star. Whereas in the 20th century, rock and roll was a band. It was a group of people who would come together. One person would play the drums, one person would play bass, one person would play this, one person would sing, and that was the band. That was popularity. And again, you sort of have a similar thing with, bands like Coldplay and things like that. There's exceptions, obviously, that going into the 21st century. But when you look at the bigger picture, the reason why rock and roll doesn't probably have this much influence as it did back in its heyday was because, again, we're becoming more of a me society of individual, like, yeah, look at how cool me I am. You see Kanye every single time going up there going, yeah, I'm so awesome, look at me, and boo boo. You have sassy Taylor Swift, and you have crazy Miley Cyrus, doing something crazy, and then people, again, pay attention. So it's a lot more individualized as far as, whereas back in the day, when you had the Beatles, it was a group. It was a group of people who came together and who played a role in making the band. Now it's more about the one person, the one star, the one person being the band, than so much of a group. And rock is a very group-based genre. So yeah, I think that's definitely why rock and roll has diminished as far as popularity is concerned, I think, within the 21st century. But those are really my theories as to why I feel rock has lost sort of its relevance or popularity. Again, it's not completely diminished. I mean, there are obviously big exceptions to the rule. But as far as just generally speaking, I think the popularity as far as rock is concerned has significantly declined. I mean, when you look at who's really big within rock right now, I mean, it's usually it's their combination of genres, and again, obviously there's exceptions, like Coldplay still maintains its relevancy. Imagine Dragons is still fairly popular. You do have your bands. But as far as the big names, it's leaning more towards individual artists and pop, and a lot of it is more geared towards generic sound rather than trying to do something unique or try to say something interesting through lyrics. Um, it's just about sort of pleasing the crowd, instead of trying to stand out and be different. But I think that's really why rock has really lost its real dominance that it once had, because it's not only a genre shift, and it's also a cultural shift. The way the 20th century operated is, as far as um, lifestyle and viewpoint of the world, is completely different than the 21st century, especially when we have iPhones and iPads and all that stuff. We're obviously going to have different opinions on things, I think. Um, and as far as music is concerned, I think the younger generation definitely has a different opinion on music when it comes to talent or anything than what the older generation thought was great. But I think really rock has passed um, its uh, its popularity curve, so to speak. Um, I still think that there will be musicians that will definitely come and go. It's definitely not rock isn't dead, I think at all. But I think its relevancy, as far as maintaining a huge, maintaining the power and influence that it once had, I don't think within the 21st century that's going to happen, because of the huge cultural shift, of the huge shift that we have as far as the way we view music, the technology, all of that. I think has completely shifted our view. But I think again, it's not to say that there can't be good uh, rock artists out there that maintain some popularity. But as far as the influence, the impact, it's probably not going to leave the same mark as it did within the 20th century. But I mean, these are just my thoughts when it comes to this particular topic. I'm sure there are people who have totally different understandings, but those are just based on my conclusions and my observations. But I'd be more than happy to hear what anybody else has to say on this topic. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say. However, if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.